Hello, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins. The show is called My Strategy. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. We're very happy to be here with you today and glad that you could join us. My Strategy radio show episodes are live on Saturdays, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the importance of exercise as a motivational force. Regular exercising can lead to a longer life. Lack of exercise makes finding motivation difficult and can cause physical and mental health issues. However, there is hope because the damage from lack of exercise can be reversed. Well, welcome everyone. So happy to be here with you today. My Strategy radio show is about reflecting on the prior week. Think about what we've accomplished. What are our plans for this upcoming week? But keep in mind that now or any time is a good time to assess your personal development strategy, because that's what we focus on here on the My Strategy radio show. It's personal development. Now, the show continues to grow. We're available on iHeart, iTunes, Player, FM, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spreaker, and many more digital platforms. So if you'd like to hear this show in podcast format, you can find it on most of those platforms. You can find me on most social media platforms. Actually, I shouldn't say most social media platforms because there are so many of them. A couple of the common platforms are Twitter. You can find me at Hawkins John. That's Hawkins John. Or I do have a website at johnmhawkins.com. It's johnmhawkins.com. Just like anything in life, we need to have a strategy and a plan to help us reach our goals, because sometimes the best laid plans don't always work. Now, this week, I am looking for your stories. Do you have any good examples, perhaps a tip or a trick, a idea for an upcoming show? You can send it to talk@johnmhawkins.com. That's talk@johnmhawkins.com. All right, this week we're going to be talking about the importance of exercise as a motivational force. We're going to talk about living longer by exercising daily, how it can help us live longer lives. We'll then talk a little bit about what happens when you don't exercise, the downsides of not exercising. However, keeping in mind that exercise is something that we can implement later in life, and we can actually reverse some of those effects. So don't fear, there is hope for us out there. We'll talk a little bit about the benefits of healthy diet and fitness, specifically early in life. Now, you might not be early in your life, but you can always provide a good example to someone who is. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some strategies. And I'm going to give you some motivational nutritional quotes to help get you through this week, get you excited and ready to go. All right. So I've got an article here by Michelle Crouch. It's called To Live Longer, Exercise Daily. Now, there's no judgment on this show. We're really going to be exploring some of these different perspectives on exercise, and we'll pick and figure out which ones are the best ones for us to implement in our lives. Michelle says, while you know exercise is good for you, you've heard so many millions of times, and newer research on it is there's far-reaching benefits, and it's something that anyone can benefit from, whether you're in your middle ages or truly older, need to hear. She says the latest evidence is showing that exercise not only strengthens your heart and trim your waist, but regular physical activity can actually slow the aging process on a cellular level and potentially add years to your life. Now, this show is all about personal development, so I want us to think about it from that perspective. Are we able to grow as a person without having good health, without feeling your best? That's what I want us to think about this week. She goes on to say, consider this. While federal guidelines now recommend at least 2.5 hours a week of moderate exercise, Harvard University researchers recently noted that as little as 15 minutes of physical activity a day can boost your lifespan by 3 years. What's more, a remarkable 2018 Journal of the American Medical Association Network Open study found that not exercising increases your risk of premature death and more than cardiovascular disease, diabetes, or even smoking. Latest research also gives us our first clue about physical activity and why it is so important. And it appears that it can actually make your cells biologically younger. And who wouldn't want to be biologically younger? Brigham Young University researchers looked at DNA samples of nearly 6,000 adults. They measured the lengths of study participants' telomeres. Now, telomeres are the molecular caps at the end of chromosomes that tend to get shorter with age. But they found that people with a higher activity levels had longer telomeres than those who were sedentary. In fact, the exercisers had a biological age that was about 9 years younger. 9 years. Pretty significant. Another research study found that men and women in their 70s who exercise regularly have the heart, lung, and muscle fitness of healthy people 30 years younger. Says here in quotes, "We were all shocked," says Scott Tropp, the director of the Human Performance Laboratory at Ball State University and author of this study. Tropp said that he assumed that as you got older, you became frail and weak. But looking at the muscle of older exercisers compared to the younger ones, we couldn't tell who was young or who was old. Now think about that. Imagine if you had the body of a person that was 9 years younger. How much more energy would you have? How much more motivation would you have? What could you do with your life with regard to accomplishing your goals and objectives? It says while Tropp's study focused on men and women who have been exercising for decades, the important thing here, I want all of you to hear this, is that it is never too late to start. Studies show that even people who start exercising in their 80s and 90s experience health and longevity benefits. A study that was published in the Internal Journal of Stroke, for instance, showed that those who became fit later in life, 40 to 59, cut their risk of potential stroke by nearly half. There's always hope with regard to exercise. They give a couple tips here around finding a partner, starting small, work up to an hour a day, consider high-intensity intervals. All right, you're listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. When we come back, we're going to talk about what happens when you don't exercise. We'll be right back. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'm John M. Hawkins. The show is called My Strategy. Right before the break, we were talking about living longer by exercising daily. And we learned that people who exercised regularly, biologically, were younger by an average of 9 years than those who did not exercise. So today we're talking about exercise and how it can be a motivational factor, help give us the strength and everything we need to be the best we can. And that's what we focus on in this show is personal development and helping you to be the best person you can be. This segment, I want to talk about what happens to your body when you don't exercise. So what happens when you don't exercise? Got an article here from the blog Power of Positivity. The article is titled, Science Explains What Happens to Your Body When You Don't Exercise. Starts off by saying it's no secret that exercise can be tough, especially if you aren't used to it. Finding the motivation to get started can be even tougher. Despite how hard it is, we still must do it. Must do it. It's essential to human life to get up and move. The consequences are dire if you don't get adequate physical activity. At first, you may not notice what's happening to your body, but eventually it will become visible. Mirrors don't lie. When it becomes apparent, that means some damage has already been done. So what exactly does lack of physical activity do to your body? Scientists explain in detail what happens to your body when you don't get enough physical activity. Keep reading to find out more. Now, when I read an article like this that's sort of doom and gloom, I'm always thinking about the positive, the upside, at the end of the article. So while we are going to be talking about some doom and gloom, I want you to know that we can change this. We can reverse this. Have hope and have an optimistic outcome that you have the ability to affect change, and by you affecting change can reverse much of this negative implications of not exercising enough. Number one, they say lack of motivation. You may think that you need the motivation to start exercising, but in truth, a lack of it tends to a lack of motivation. You begin to let yourself go, and before you know it, you can't get into the sense of feeling you deserve to be better or to be motivated. Kathy Smith, famous in 1980s for her aerobics videos and fitness classes, said in an interview with BeliefNet that exercise rescued her from a path that could have been partying and playing and low self-esteem and just not taking care of myself and getting into the wrong crowd. And I would say that exercise was my salvation. It rescued her from an unhealthy lifestyle. Another impact or effect is depression and anxiety. A lack of physical activity doesn't directly cause depression and anxiety. However, it's a solution to depression and anxiety. Without adequate physical activity, you could be setting yourself up to sink into mental despair. What about decreased cognitive functioning? Lack of physical activity can lead to a decline in cognitive functioning over time. This decline can manifest in mental diseases such as Alzheimer's or dementia later in life. Many people never think about how a lack of exercise affects their minds. On average, the effects don't become evident until they're in their 60s. And from a personal development perspective, I can tell you that we need to be as cognitively aware and sharp as possible. Physical consequences. This is probably the one that we know most about. The physical consequences of lack of adequate physical activity are what's getting noticed most often. Consequently, that would prompt someone to increase their physical activity. But that's not always the case. Lack of exercise can also lead to uncontrollable food cravings. The link between lack of physical activity and uncontrollable food cravings may not be visible, but they are scientifically proven. Goes on to talk about two parts. The first part is that increasing physical activity will cause a person to crave more food or energy to replace lost energy. This type of food craving isn't wrong. These are sustaining food cravings because you're burning so many calories. However, you must make healthy food choices. Says there is evidence that exercising right before a meal can decrease the amount of food that a person would want to eat in one sitting. The most obvious consequence of not having proper exercise and good diets in our daily lives is weight gain. Weight gain is the number one consequence of not getting enough physical activity. The reason for this is that it throws off the balance of calories in and out. And I think it's important to stipulate here that everyone I know has had some issue with weight gain. For some, it's just more dramatic than others. So know that you are not alone. We all have had those issues, and everybody, in my guesstimation, struggles with it. The next one is health consequences, diseases, and conditions, whether you gain weight or not due to lack of exercise, scientists have found evidence that there is a high risk of health problems without regular physical activity. What about heart disease? Heart disease, also known as cardiovascular disease, is one of the major killers among health conditions. An increase in fat cells, especially around the waist, known as visceral fat, makes heart disease much worse. According to the Center for Disease Control, one person dies from cardiovascular disease in the United States every 37 seconds. It's a very alarming mortality rate, and unfortunately, since it can be prevented with regular physical activity. Imagine that. Every 37 seconds, somebody is dying from cardiovascular disease, and we could mitigate some of those deaths by exercise. There's also joint and bone problems. Physical activity contributes to the health of your joints. Muscular atrophy. Muscular atrophy is a condition where your muscles waste away due to the lack of activity. Those are some of the negative impacts of not exercising. You're listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins. When we come back, we're going to talk about reversing those negative effects. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins. The show is called My Strategy. Well, hopefully I didn't depress you too much with all those negative effects of not exercising, so you can turn your radio up a little bit more, because now we're going to be talking about reversing those effects. On this show, we talk about personal development and providing strategies to help us find motivation, to help us be our best selves. So this segment is going to be all about reversing those effects. The damage has been done. Maybe we haven't been the ideal person who eats the best and exercises as we should, but the good news is that we can reverse this. I've got an article by Alice Park. It's titled Health, Exercise, and Fitness. You can reverse the effects of being a couch potato. And I just will admit that, yes, at times I am a couch potato. So know that I'm speaking from experience of sitting on those couches from time to time. Alice starts by saying, sitting too much can be deadly, but all hope is not lost, even for the most committed of couch potatoes. She cites a study that was published in the journal Circulation. Researchers say that you can make up for years of sedentary behavior with 2 years of exercise. In this study, Dr. Benjamin Levine, a professor of exercise science at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center, and his colleagues studied 53 healthy people ages 45 to 64. All of these people were relatively sedentary for the most of their adult lives. Half were randomly assigned to an intensive regime for 2 years. The other half did a program more focused on balance and flexibility that included yoga and balance training exercises 3 to 4 times a week. Now, this is important because when we say exercise, and I always suggest talking to your doctor or somebody who has much more experience than I do with regard to this, right? We need you to be healthy and fit from a personal development perspective, but when it comes time to getting proper medical advice, I do suggest reaching out. So when we talk about this, keep in mind that this is one person's opinion that we are relaying on. It's always the best to go talk to your doctor. But it says here that of these 2 different programs that people were assigned to, right, we've got the intensive exercise and those that were assigned to the balance and flexibility. And this all is to help reverse those effects of our couch potatoism. So it says here the intensive cardio program included a week-long, hour-long exercise session. It included biking, brisk walking, tennis, or dancing, and the weekly high-intensity interval training workout. Then there was the moderate intensity exercise that was 2 or 3 times a week and at least one strength training session per week. So they did the pros and cons of these, and we're going to learn which one was more effective. It says here, after a few months on the exercise programs, Levine measured structural features of the heart related to how flexible the heart muscles were. He compares this to the stretchiness of a rubber band. This elasticity in the heart muscle is critical for healthy heart functions, he says. But just as the rubber band starts to stiffen with age, the heart also begins to shrink and become less flexible over time, which can lead to heart failure and less efficient pumping of the blood throughout the body. And remember, back in the last segment, every 37 seconds somebody dies from heart issues. And some of this could have been prevented. Levine found that the intensive exercise effectively reversed some of the stiffening in the heart. People in the intensive exercise group were able to improve the amount of oxygen the heart took in from the blood and consequently distributed to the rest of the body, while those in the balance and flexibility group did not show any improvement. The exercise group was also able to reduce the stiffness in the heart muscle, and there was no change in measurements among other people. What this means, Levine said, is that there is hope for couch potatoes, those who have been relatively sedentary for most of their lives. But the idea that sedentary behavior by itself is injurious and can't be overcome by exercise is not really true, he says. Given the right kind and the right amount of exercise and training, you can prevent the effects of extreme sedentary behavior. So my takeaway on that is this. If we have been sedentary, and many of us do live sedentary lives, it's not good enough just to go make up our own program, our own plan, and go out and do it thinking that we are going to gain the benefits. But what it is telling us is that we need to lean on those experts who have done the research and can measure our performance to help overcome the effects of not getting enough exercise. Also, these folks that they did the study on were between the ages of 45 and 64. So depending on where you are in life, that also could have an impact on your strategy, your exercise strategy. It goes on to say, still according to this study and previous ones that Levine has conducted, there is a time window for taking advantage of resilient heart muscle. At some point, the muscle becomes too stiff and the effects of too little activity can't be reversed. Just as a dried-out rubber band simply snaps when it's pulled too hard, a recent study of elderly people found that some muscles in the body, particularly those in the legs, won't return to their full power after a few weeks of disuse, even after training to build them up. So there's a downside here. We have only so much time before we get to a point where our muscles atrophy. It does say here that the good news is that the heart can bounce back after disuse. For most people, the window for rescuing the heart is late middle age, 55 to 65. This is when the harmful effects of sedentary behavior can be reversed. So there is hope. If you are younger than 65 and have been sedentary, we've got some work to do, but we'll get to it in the next segment. You're listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about the brain benefits of a healthy diet and fitness in early life. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins. The show is called My Strategy, And if you're just joining us, welcome. My Strategy Radio show episodes are live on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Today we've been talking about the importance of exercise in our lives as a motivational force. Talked about how regular exercise can lead to a longer life, how lack of exercise makes finding motivation difficult and can cause health issues. And we just talked about the damage from lack of exercise and hopeful message that it can be reversed, assuming we catch it before the end of the window, which according to researchers was age 65. So we can start to reverse some of those effects if we catch it before then. I think my biggest takeaway is not all exercise regimens will help us reverse those effects. So we do want to talk to our doctors and professionals to get some ideas on the types of exercise that we can do. In those articles we referenced, it said vigorous exercise. I don't know what that definition is, so I'm assuming it's cardiovascular centric, but that would be up to your health professional to figure that out with you. All right. So in this segment, I want to talk a little bit about the brain benefits of a healthy diet. And this is specific to early life. You might say, John, why are we talking about the benefits of healthy diet and fitness early in life? Odds are that young people aren't listening to a show or watching a show like this. And I would counter that by saying, as we learn, as we understand and create knowledge by looking at truths, facts, life experience, we have a duty. We have a duty to help the next generation. We have the responsibility to pass on as much knowledge as we can so that they can avoid some of those pitfalls that we might have stumbled into. And I can tell you that, I've stumbled into a lot of pitfalls. So that's why I feel that I have a message to tell here. But hopefully, and it doesn't matter if you could be somebody who does regular exercise and is the best example of it, or you're somebody who is on the other end of the spectrum where you aren't the best example. The good news is that we have the ability to change, but I do think it's important for us to pass this information on. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the brain benefits of healthy diet in early life, and whether you've got a son or daughter who has a newborn, or you work with somebody who has a newborn, or perhaps there's a young person in your life that you see as gaining some of the effects of poor exercise and health. I think it's important for us to, at some point, gain the confidence to provide either an example, if we don't feel it's appropriate to, intervene and tell somebody what they should do with their life. Or if it is somebody you love, provide them with the data and the facts to help them appreciate what these good habits at an early age can do for these young people. So in this article by Christopher Berglund, he says, researchers continue to discover that early nutrition and physical activity play a critical role in the cognitive, emotional, and behavioral development of children. The result from a 5-year study called Nutrimenti, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, probably not, which was released in September of 2013, have found that nutrition during pre-birth and in the early life literally programs long-term health, well-being, brain development, and mental performance of children. There was another study titled The Influence of Childhood Aerobic Fitness on Learning and Memory, and they found that aerobic fitness improved learning, memory in 9 to 10-year-olds. Lauren Rain and colleagues from the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign have found that physical fitness boosts learning and memory in children. particularly when initial learning on a task is more challenging. The researchers from this Nutrimenti project looked at the effect of 5 different diet variables on the development of optimal mental performance in children up to the age of 9. The 5-year study involved hundreds of European families with young children. 5 important early life nutrients: breast milk, omega-3 fatty acids, B vitamins, folic acid, and iodine. The study found that taking folic acid during the first 3 months of pregnancy can reduce the likelihood of behavioral problems during early childhood. Eating oily fish was also found to be beneficial, not only because the omega-3 fatty acids are building blocks for brain cells, but also for the iodine content is believed to improve reading ability in children when measured at age 9. As I think about this and reflect on it, families with young children typically are in the early stages of their career, and they might not have as much resources to purchase vitamins and nutritional supplements. They're expensive. They have other priorities. So I think it's important, if you do want to help or have somebody in your immediate family, what percentage of monies or help could you provide to them to make sure they're getting that proper nutrition, to make sure that they are getting those vitamins and nutrients that are needed? You could affect the life of a child, and it's their entire life, which to me is pretty amazing, and why I think of this as low-hanging fruit. Imagine just making a small investment in vitamins and nutrients to a pregnant woman, and that investment pays off dividends for 65, 70 years down the road. The article goes on to say that short-term studies seem unable to detect the real influence of nutrition in early life, and this study was designed to be long-term study, as the brain takes much more time to mature, and early deficiencies have far more reaching effects, so nutrition is of utmost importance. The article goes on to talk about the importance of good nutrition in cognitive development and much more. So my thought here is that we need to invest in the children and the babies before, and that will set them up for success. You're listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins, coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, I'm going to take you through some motivational strategies that you can use to get the energy you need to start with this exercise regimen. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins. The show is My Strategy. Today we've been talking about the importance of exercise as a motivational force. Right before the break, we were talking about the brain benefits of a healthy diet and fitness in early life. My takeaway from that segment was that we need to help those young children, the young babies, throughout their lives, make sure they have proper diet, nutrition, and exercise, because if you can instill those good habits in those children early on, they're going to be set for life. All right, in this segment, I want to talk a little bit about, well, actually, in this segment, I traditionally in this show talk about our systematic approach, and I haven't mentioned it for the past few shows. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit today, and then I want to give you some motivation. Motivation to help you put together your strategy and your plan, whatever it takes, to reverse course if needed, or perhaps improve your course. Now, my approach that I take is a little framework. It's a systematic approach that I use. And with repetition, as I go through these steps, I get to a point where I just think about these things with every decision that I'm making. And it might seem difficult to put a strategy or a plan on a sheet of paper and then go through and iterate through it. But for me, this is how I think about things. And there's lots of complex frameworks out there. And so from my perspective, I want to keep it as simple as possible. So it's a quick 5-step process that you go through. Step number 1 is some sort of awareness, right? Are you aware that exercise and diet is having an impact on your life? Could be positive impact, could be negative. You might be exercising too much or too little. Everything's a spectrum. So the first thing is to be aware. Are we aware that either more exercise or less exercise, better diets, or perhaps more fatty foods are going to help us? You need to figure that out for yourself, but there has to be some sort of awareness. So once we've come up with that awareness that we need change, then we need to start thinking about this from an analytical perspective. We want to assess and analyze. We want to assess the current situation, figure out what steps you can take, identify what isn't working, what is working. Are you having difficulty making decisions? Is it you? Is it somebody else? Is it a financial impact to you? So assess and analyze. And this is where we need to go out and talk to third parties. It could be our doctor, a nutritionist. It could be a family member, a friend. Get the data. Once we've got the data, we want, and some courses of actions or things we can do. The third step is strategize and plan. Every day you do things, right? There's activities that you do. There's habits that you have. There's things that you do throughout your daily life. So now the question is, from a strategization and planning perspective, which of those actions that you are doing on a daily basis are helping you get to your goal? Which of those actions are you doing? We have a finite amount of time in a day. So if we are focusing time on one activity, and that activity is not getting us to the goal, we want to think about what activity could we replace that activity with. Real simple example. Let's say you work all day long and you come home, you eat dinner, and at 7 p.m. or 7:30, you turn on the television and watch TV for an hour and a half. Go about your day, planning for the next day, and then, doing the same thing the following day. Well, what if you changed that habit of 7:30 for the next hour and a half watching TV? What if you replace that with, at 7:30, I'm going to take a 15-minute walk. I'm going to take a 30-minute walk. I'm going to sit on my stationary bike. That simple change in your life could change your entire outcome. And that is why it is so important for us to be thinking strategically, thinking about those actions that we can change. I don't want you to make a bunch of big changes. I don't want you to go turn your entire life upside down and start exercising and that's your core focus, because if you did that, you would change your entire path. We need to do measured changes, things that fit within our current life. Because if I shifted everything to being an exercise and that's all I did, I'm going to change the outcome. I'm going to change my future state. And I don't know if that future state is going to be something that is good for me. So it's measured. It's measured change and figuring out strategically what is the smallest change that we can make that will provide a positive effect on our future. It could be that you're just not getting the right vitamins. So in the morning, you want to set a trigger, assuming we did the assessment and we found out that we were low in some vitamin. You would set the trigger that with your morning coffee, with your morning tea, with your morning breakfast, that you are going to include your vitamin and your supplements at that point. We have to be extremely simple with these changes. A drastic change is going to completely throw us off. So that's where, we need to have measured change. We need to assess our situation. We need to figure out exactly strategically, with pinpoint precision, what are a few things we can change that can help us? So in my example of watching TV, if you spent, from 7:30 to 7:45 taking a walk and then coming back, continue to do your TV watching from 7:45 for the next hour and 15 minutes. That's not too much of a change. That's something that you can do. Once we've started to implement these little changes, we need to, implement was that fourth piece. So once we've implemented that, we need to get support and evaluation. And support and evaluation is, how is this new course of actions supporting our goals and what we want to do going forward? So it's constantly getting feedback, looking at the data, and seeing if we are having an effect on our health and fitness. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we come back. We're going to help you put your plan in place. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm John M. Hawkins. The show is called My Strategy. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Well, in case you missed this broadcast, you can listen on iHeartRadio, Apple iTunes, or many of the other digital platforms out there. And if you'd like to have something covered in the show, send an email to talk@johnmhawkins.com. That's talk@johnmhawkins.com, or give us a call at 844-MY-STRATEGY. That's 844-MY-STRATEGY. Well, in this episode, we've been talking about the importance of exercise as a motivational force. In fact, you can live longer by exercising daily. Exercise not only strengthens the heart, trims the waist, but regular exercise can slow aging at a cellular level. This was proven by where BYU researchers looked at DNA samples of 6,000 adults. They measured the telomeres, which are the molecular caps at the end of the chromosomes. And what they found was that those with higher activity had longer telomeres. In fact, on average, just by looking at the DNA samples, they had identified that those with regular exercise, on average, showed a 9-year younger biological age than those who did not exercise. They did give us some hope and say that it is never too late to start exercising. What happens to us if we don't exercise? We don't take care of ourselves. Because exercise can be tough, especially when you're not used to it. Finding motivation can be even tougher. How do we go about finding that motivation? We learned that there are consequences of not exercising. Mental and emotional consequences. Actually, not exercising provides a lack of motivation, depression and anxiety, decreased cognitive functioning, uncontrollable food cravings, weight gain, diseases and heart conditions, heart disease, joint and bone problems, muscle atrophy. We learned that every 30 seconds somebody dies from heart disease. Every 37 seconds. In a 60-minute show, how many people have died. The good news is, though, that you can reverse the effects of being a couch potato and not exercising. But they say it's going to take work. Studies show that most sedentary people from the ages of 45 to 64, if they started vigorous exercise, and again, check with your doctors or nutritionists to come up with what that means, what that definition is for you. My guess is that it will have something to do with the measurement of your visceral fat. At least that was my experience in going down this path. But it shows that this intensive exercise does reverse those effects of the aging, which is great. But what about 45 to 64-year-olds? We need to catch them before then. So we talked a little bit about the benefits of healthy diet and fitness at an early age, and how early childhood nutrition and physical activity play a very important role in cognitive and behavioral development. Aerobic fitness improves learning, memory in 9 to 10-year-olds. And for the babies, there were 5 important nutritional elements: breast milk, omega-3 fatty acids, B vitamins, folic acid, and iodine. Eating smart will not only make you smart, it's the smart thing to do. Everyone needs positive reinforcement when they do something well. Diet is just as important, if not more, than exercise. Life is more than just eating. Eating right is a lifestyle. Eating right does wonders for your body, and you only get one body. Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.